In this module, we are going to discuss Agreed Upon Procedures, Section 4400. And as always, we want to be efficient and effective, follow professional standards, and document what we have done properly. Now, this section appears to be pretty simple and easy, but we're going to discuss because perhaps it's not. And here is the example given of what such a report might be on, and there are endless possibilities to this. And I guess the first thing we have to understand is this is a report to a third party on what management has done. So the client, quote unquote, is a third party, and we're reporting to that third party, who could be anybody, on what management has done. It's quite a different situation from reporting to the shareholders on their company. So that makes things different, and we need to think about that carefully. So the example given is somebody wants to know about contracts above $25,000 and that they've got at least 3 bids for them. Why they'd want that, I don't know, but that's the example. So what we are supposed to do is get from management a list of contracts that were awarded above $25,000. Now, as I say at the bottom, can you see why a third party might misunderstand these results? Because if management wants to fool us and the third party, the very simple thing they do, they've got a $100,000 contract that they know they didn't get 3 bids on, they just exclude it from the list. And the third party is going to be relying on us, presumably, that we've got all the contracts above 25,000. So right at the very beginning, there's a significant constraint on that and a significant possibility that the third party will misunderstand our report. Then we are to check that all contracts had at least 3 bids. And again, the problem with that is we're going to be looking at documentation. And these days, it's really easy to fake documentation with various software. Easy to do, so it could be, and we have no way of knowing, that one of the 3 bids is fake, and we'd never know that. We'd look at it and we'd go, oh, well, there's 1, 2, 3 bids. And then we are to compare the bid to the amount ultimately paid. And again, the assumption here is these are really simple contracts for something where there's absolutely no possibility for there to have been a difference, that we bid 25,000 and we charge more than that because of whatever reason. So the assumption is that we get bids from people and the bid price is exactly the price that we pay, and then we report what we found. So I think we can see that there's a significant risk here, particularly in this example, that the third party will misunderstand what we have done and place more weight on our report than they should. And indeed, I don't even know in this example why a third party would want such a report. So it is of limited applicability. There are not many of these around. And the first constraint on us accepting this is, will the third party misunderstand the value of this report? So a clear engagement letter is needed, and we've got to get the engagement letter from the third party. And are they going to be prepared to sign it? And if they don't, we can't do it. Very limited applicability. And we are going to need a clear representation letter. Now, it's not required, it's suggested. I think it's absolutely required. And again, we're going to have to consider, why might the third party want this? Like, what is going on? Why might they want it? And if we're not satisfied with any of this, we should probably decide not to accept the engagement, because we're just going to get into trouble. The other issues are independence, because this is different. we are not reporting on the activities of management to the shareholders, to the board of directors, to the audit committee. That's kind of a standard thing we understand. Independence, I'm not going to say is simple, but we just make sure that we don't own any shares in the company, and there's a few other things we've got to do. But the independence issue here, can we be independent of the client? Can we be independent reporting to the third party, whoever they are? Something we need to think about, and it's not clear, and it's not something we're used to thinking about. So have to think about that. The other thing, often the engaging party, the third party, has their own report that they want us to sign, and it may or may not be okay. And if they say this is the report we want, we may compare it to the one in standards and say, well, no, we can't. Or we may be able to modify it, but that's something we're going to have to think about carefully. And so we're going to have to think carefully about, do we want to be involved in this at all? So standards, 14, 15, 16. 14 standard paragraph have an understanding. And again, remember, an understanding is different from understand. So an understanding is less of a requirement than if they had said, be sure you completely understand the standard. If somebody says, did you completely understand the standard? You say, no, but I had an understanding, so I meant 14. And you comply with the section, obviously, and don't say you complied unless you did. So I think we need a checklist question for each of those. I have an understanding, I complied. 16 is kind of the conclusion. Don't say you complied unless you did. 17, comply with ethical requirements, and this is complicated. What are the ethical requirements? Independence, and we don't have to be independent to do this assignment. But if we're reporting to the shareholders, can we also do this report? I don't know. The quality management section obviously applies. This is a complicated area that's not exactly clear what we have to do. Need a checklist question. Have we complied with the ethical requirements? Used professional judgment. A checklist question. I used professional judgment. The engagement response partner is responsible for quality, and there is a list of things that the engagement partner has to do. Each one of those things should be in a checklist question. I did this, I did this, I did them all. Now paragraph 20 talks about use of an expert. And in the example, they suggest that we've had to use a translator as an expert, and you have to mention that in the report. And so if we're using an expert, we need to think about whether or not we can do this. This is something within our capabilities, or whether it's something that the expert should be doing. So if we're using a professional engineer as an expert to provide an opinion on something that has to do with engineering, we should probably decide that this is not something we can do. This is something that the professional engineer should do. In the circumstance we're using a translator, maybe we use 2 translators to make sure that they're not fibbing to us. But again, have a checklist question to make sure that our use of an expert is acceptable. 21, we need to understand the purpose of the report and whether it's appropriate. And this is something we don't have to consider in a statutory audit, something we do all the time. We know why people want them. We know that we can do them. We know the expectation gap. Here's something where the expectation gap could be very, very large, and we're going to need to consider whether or not we want to be involved. And we should have a checklist question for that. 22, 5 criteria to make sure the engagement can be done. Very important. Checklist question for each. Make sure you think about each of those very carefully. And maybe we can't do the engagement. Short version of paragraph 23 is quit if you find you should not have accepted. So if you're going through the engagement and you go, oh, we really don't want to be involved in this, quit. Now, technically, it leaves it up to the firm, not the partner. But if the engagement partner goes, I don't want to be involved anymore, presumably the firm is going to agree. Again, a checklist question. 24, get an engagement letter, and this is interesting because we've got to get the engaging party, the third party, to sign the engagement letter, and maybe they won't. So that could be another constraint. There is an example provided. There are very specific things in paragraph 24 that we have to include in the engagement letter, and these are things that we want to make sure the third party knows, so they have to sign the engagement letter. And for instance, that we're going to report factual results only, and we're giving no assurance. And why I would want to engage someone to give me no assurance, I don't know. And then there are another list of things that should be in the engagement letter. Very important. Get one, no question. 26, get a new letter if it's needed. In other words, if partway through the engagement you realize that the old engagement letter wasn't satisfactory, get a new one. The 26 talks about we are in a continuing engagement. We have an engagement to do this every year. And the standard thing about consider whether or not you need to get a new letter, my experience and feeling is that the amount of work we have to do to decide not to get a new letter is much more than just getting a new letter. You signed it last year, sign it again this year, and we'll change it if we need to. A checklist question. So far this is all about acceptance. So 27 and 28 are do it, do the procedures, and get a rep letter. Very important. It says only probably get one. You don't have to, but get one. And for instance, in the example provided where they've got the engaging party, which is the third party, and they've got the responsible party, who's management. So I want management to tell me, yes, we gave you a correct list of all contracts above $25,000. So if they didn't and they lied to us, I want them to have lied to us in writing. So when the third party gets mad at us, we can say the responsible party lied to us. And careful about this. 29 talks again about use of an expert, that you may not want to do it yourself because the expert should do it. We talked about that before. Important. 30 is the report. 18 things, an example is provided, and in the report we point out that the procedures may not be appropriate, that there is no assurance, and 18 things altogether. So the engaging party, the third party, has to be satisfied with that report. 31, mention the use of an expert, talked about that. Limitations, if there is a summary of findings, got to be very careful that we're taking no responsibility for anything. And of course, we don't date it till it's done. Don't date it till we've got the rep letter. The report looks different from other engagements. It's a very long report. And there's an example given. Make sure you follow exactly what the report says. There are a number of disclaimers in the report, and they all need to be there. Documentation, get an engagement letter, document the nature, timing, and standard procedures, document your findings, obviously. Now, this assumes that the person requesting will accept our report format, and often they have their own. So that's going to be at the very beginning something we need to think about. Is the report they provide acceptable to us? Does it meet the requirements of standards? Do we have to add some words? Will the third party accept it? That's another tough thing about accepting these engagements, because maybe we decide, sorry, if this is the report you want us to sign, we can't, so we're not going to do it. So how valuable is this to the user? How costly is it compared to how valuable is it? And how often we're going to do this ever in our practice? These are not done regularly. And if one comes along, maybe we're just going to decide we just don't want to do it. It's too complicated. So thanks for listening.